Kizamde, hop on the beat!
Welcome back to another Debunking Araki Forgot, where I answer your JoJo plot hole related questions. The last two installments of this series had quite a long gap between them, so I wound up accumulating a ton of topics to go over. With me getting back into making videos more frequently, I reached out for some more questions and got quite a sizable response. So I was actually able to put together yet another list very quickly this time. So let's get right into the first topic. Starting off, we have a question from parts 1 and 2. They ask who built the original stone mask seen in part 1. They say that we know the Pillarmen built the special stone mask that fits with the red stone of Asia, but that we never saw who built the normal variety. This question is just a simple lack of understanding of the story since this was clearly explained. There really shouldn't be any confusion here since Cars is the one who invented the stone masks in the first place. The flashback to Cars' past directly tells us this, and we see him using the original stone mask. This mask is what granted Cars and his allies their greater power and unique abilities. But it wasn't powerful enough, which is why the other type of mask was created to harness the red stone's power. This next comment asks what Joseph's motivation is for fighting the Pillarmen. They say that since the Pillarmen aren't hostile towards him directly, and don't plan to take over the world with vampires like Dio did, there's no reason for Joseph to go after them. Well, I responded to this comment with a pretty clear answer, which is that the Pillarmen becoming ultimate beings would lead to life on Earth being wiped out. But in response, they said that this was just a fan theory and was never stated in the manga, and that if the Pillarmen got their goal of being able to survive in sunlight, they would just move to somewhere desolate and only occasionally eat humans. However, nothing that this comment says is true whatsoever. The Pillarmen being a threat to the world is not a theory, it is something directly stated by the source material. In Cars' backstory, narration states that the great power granted by the mask required Cars to consume more life to survive, and without intervention this would have wiped out all living things on the planet. The other Pillarmen realized this, and that was their entire reason they turned on Cars in the first place. Strangely though, when confronted with this fact, the commenter continues to claim that it's a theory, but that even if it was true, Joseph doesn't know any of that and still has no reason to fight the Pillarmen. So let's go ahead and take a deeper look at the story. Joseph's motivation at the beginning of part 2 is to find Speedwagon, who he learns is in Mexico, so he tracks him down to the Nazi laboratory just as Santana breaks free. As we can see, Joseph actually doesn't really care about Santana at all and just messes around with him. And he just tells Stroheim that it's his problem. Santana is the one to first attack Joseph, and he acts in self-defense. And he then goes after Speedwagon, which makes Joseph attack him. Later when they get outside, Stroheim directly tells Joseph that they are studying the Pillarmen because they recognize how dangerous they are and know that if they aren't stopped, humanity will be wiped out. And after this, he tells Joseph about the other Pillarmen and to go meet Caesar to stop them. So we see very clearly how Joseph realizes the Pillarmen are a threat and his direct motivation for wanting to stop them. Some other bizarre claims from this commenter are that the Pillarmen wouldn't have created vampires like Dio did. But within part 2, we clearly see that the Pillarmen created an army of vampires. In fact, the entire reason vampires exist in the first place is because the Pillarmen were creating them as a food source. They also claimed that the Pillarmen would just live in isolation after getting their goal. But that's what the species was originally doing, and it's Cars that disrupted the natural order and caused them to consume more life. Our next comment deals with part 3. This person mentions how I say that Dio believes his fate is to overcome the Joestars, and they say that this is contradicted by Dio acting paranoid towards Jotaro's stopping time, and taking extra precautions to kill him indirectly. Well, I simply don't see how this is a contradiction at all. Dio believes that he is superior and will overcome the Joestars as his final test from fate. But this does not mean that he thinks he'll just defeat them in a head-on clash. Dio is an intelligent, conniving, and backstabbing character. He does possess great strength and one of the strongest stands in the series, but that doesn't mean he's completely invulnerable. And Dio knows this since even he tells Whole Horse that his body is weak and he isn't ready to fight them yet. Dio believing that he will defeat the Joestars doesn't at all mean that he would recklessly throw himself at them. It means he would use all of the resources at his disposal to outsmart them, which is what fits with his character. The next question asks why Joseph's transfusion of Dio's blood didn't make him a vampire. They point out that while Joseph could expel the vampiric blood with Hamon, he was unconscious and wouldn't know to do this. Well, this person actually goes on to suggest the answer here, which is that some Hamon breathing is unconscious. We saw back in part 1 that after Jonathan's pressure point was triggered by Zeppeli, he used Hamon on the tree without even knowing it. In other examples, characters like Joseph and Caesar utilize Hamon in fights without truly understanding it yet. And in Joseph's case, he specifically underwent training using the breathing mask, which altered his natural breathing pattern to more efficiently generate Hamon. Also remember that Dio lost much of his blood after being pummeled by Jotaro, and much of the blood Joseph got from Dio was actually his own, which was taken moments earlier, so whatever amount of vampire blood that was left could be naturally eliminated from his body. Moving on to part 4, we have a question that I've gotten a lot over the years, which asks how Keicho managed to sneak into Angelo's prison cell, despite his ability not having any way of letting him do this. However, I disagree, since Bad Company is actually a very versatile stand. It moves as separate tiny bodies that could fit into pretty much anywhere, at a decent range since it was able to attack Josuke from all around the house, and would be completely unseen by any prison guards. So I could easily see Bad Company capable of scouting ahead to see the way in, stealing a key to the cell, or even undoing the lock on its own. One big hint to this comes from the scene itself, when Keicho casually leaves by opening Angelo's cell door from the inside. Obviously you can't just open a door to a prison cell normally, which Angelo himself points out, so clearly Keicho used his ability to open it in one way or another. This next question asks why Kira didn't just destroy the severed hand with Killer Queen when Shigechi took it, since we see later that he clearly detonates the hand without touching it, showing that he can do it remotely. First of all, I have to point out that the moment this person is talking about only exists in the anime. In the manga, when Kira sets his sights on his next target, this doesn't happen, while the anime includes him holding his bag where we can see the hand get erased. I'm guessing the reason this was added is because we never got to see where the hand went in the manga, and it was last seen laying on the ground and we just assume Kira picked it up. Now, the main question the comment asks here is why Kira didn't detonate it when Shigechi took it, and believes that Kira can detonate an object remotely. This person seems to just misunderstand the way Killer Queen's primary bomb works. Kira can turn an object into a bomb by touching it. Once an object has been armed, he can then detonate it at any point using Killer Queen. So I'm sure you can see the problem, since the hand evidently was not a bomb when Shigechi took it. Therefore, in order to erase it, Kira would have to get the hand back and touch it. As for why Kira can erase the hand later, the answer is pretty obvious, since Kira had gotten the hand back and had turned it into a bomb, so all he had to do was activate it, which doesn't require touching it again to do. Moving on to part 5, we have a question about Formaggio's stand Little Feet. They say that the stand is capable of doing things like shrinking down a car and then using it to kill someone, but asks why he didn't just do something like that to kill Narancia. Well, putting aside that the scene with the car is something only in the anime, it's pretty clear that Formaggio did not want to kill Narancia. I feel like this should be pretty obvious since Formaggio had plenty of opportunities to kill Narancia in the fight, such as when he could have just crushed him. He wanted to make Narancia talk and find Trish's location. This is why he shrunk Narancia down and put him in the bottle with the spider. After he discovered the map to their hideout, Formaggio was then going to just leave him to be eaten. The next comment is about the stand Babyface. They ask how it was possible that Gold Experience was able to turn its own severed hand into a piranha, when Giorno's ability is only able to work on things that aren't alive. Well, this has to do with Babyface's ability. Its ability is to break things down into cubes that can rearrange into any form. A big part of the battle is the fact that Giorno's ability of giving life to non-living objects is the exact opposite of Babyface's power. So this is what happened. Gold Experience's hand was severed by Babyface's ability, so it became a non-living object, and so it is able to be transformed by Gold Experience's power. One of the most common Araki Forgot topics I've seen over the years has to do with Bucciarati's undead body after his fight with King Crimson, and specifically, whether Bucciarati can bleed when he's in this state. The first time this comes up is right before the group leave the church, when Bucciarati injures his hand on a piece of metal and Giorno notes that he doesn't seem to feel pain and is barely bleeding. I've gotten many comments pointing out that this was contradicted by Abbacchio's death, when Bucciarati is shown biting his lip and blood comes out. and later when his body is shot by Mista, we see blood again. I believe there's a bit of a misunderstanding here. People seem to believe that the scene with Bucciarati's hand implies that his body has no blood inside of it. This is not the case, and in fact this is even contradicted by Giorno saying that Bucciarati did bleed from his wound, just not that much. The reason Bucciarati bleeds less is because his heart has stopped beating completely. This is directly stated by Bucciarati in his fight with Sekko. This is actually a phenomenon that exists in real life. When someone is dead, because their heart isn't beating, they bleed differently. And since there's no blood pressure, they bleed less. However, this does not mean they don't bleed at all. Obviously, there's still blood in there, and while it isn't being pumped out by a heartbeat, it can instead just trickle out. So a small amount of blood appearing with Bucciarati biting his lip isn't a contradiction. And after being filled with gunshot wounds by Mista, obviously the blood is going to come out since it would have no way of staying inside. Moving on to part 6, this comment asks how it is that Survivor's user wasn't affected when his stand took damage. Well, I could go on to state how many stands are shown to not have this effect, usually with long-range automatic stands which Survivor would be classified as. But I think the more important thing I should point out here is that what this comment describes never actually happened. Nobody ever damaged Survivor. We see the stand Survivor taking a form that travels along the ground and sends electrical signals along the wet floor to manipulate people's brains into fighting. Throughout the entire Survivor-induced fight between Jolene and Westwood, Survivor's stand form never even appears. The same is true throughout the fight with Dragon's Dream since Kenzo is still under the stand's effects and can see FF's strong points. So I simply don't know what this person means by Survivor taking damage. It could be possible that they think that people under Survivor's control taking damage should then spread to the user, but that isn't how the stand works. We see that the stand only manipulates people through electric currents, it isn't connected to their bodies at all. The stand doesn't even appear again until Guccio himself makes an appearance, and Anasui puts him out of commission. For another Survivor-related question, this person points out that since Jolene and Westwood are under the effects of Survivor and are meant to ignore pain, it doesn't make sense that Westwood would let Jolene go when she rips off his toenail, since he shouldn't actually feel anything. However, I think this is a bit of a misunderstanding, since Survivor does not completely nullify pain. The weak electric signal sent by Survivor causes extreme rage in its targets, making them want to fight. We see that these fights are far more brutal than they would be normally. According to Jolene's description, the fighting spirit induced by the stand can let you ignore your pain and fear to attack, but it doesn't get rid of it completely. We see repeatedly throughout the fight that Jolene and Westwood both react to attacks on them. The effects of these are simply dulled by their focus on fighting. This is why Jolene had to go so over the top with her attack to escape Westwood's hold. Except while this is an attack that would leave a normal person crying on the floor in pain, in this case all it does is make Westwood's grip loosen slightly for her to be able to move. Moving on, this person asks how it's possible that Whitesnake is able to create CDs from people, when at the time the stand was created, CDs didn't exist yet. Now for this one, I could just easily point out that this is a fictional story that includes fantastical things that don't exist. But that isn't really necessary, because CDs did exist before Whitesnake was created. Dio met Pucci in 1987 and received his stand about a year later. CDs were first released to the public in 1982. Not only that, the larger Laserdisc format was already in use as far back as 1978. This next question deals with the Heaven Plan. They ask how Dio knew all this specific information needed to bring about heaven, such as the 14 specific phrases and needing the souls of 36 sinners to create the green baby. Well, there's a few answers to these. As the comment itself points out, Dio was in close contact with Enya, who was a fortune teller and more well-versed in supernatural forces like fate and stand abilities than Dio was. Dio himself also became obsessed with fate due to his connection with Jonathan, and had many years inside the coffin to reach a kind of enlightenment, and in the years following his resurfacing he traveled the world to study the power of gravity that exists between people. But I think there's still some interesting stuff to go over when it comes to the specific steps of the plan. When it comes to the 14 phrases themselves, they don't really matter. The purpose of the phrases was so that the green baby would recognize Dio's trusted friend, in this case Pucci, and merge with him. By carving the phrases into his stand, Dio literally inscribed them on his soul with the intent of fulfilling heaven, so the baby created from Dio's bone inherently knew these phrases. So they were essentially just a very complicated password to ensure that the right person would complete the plan. When it comes to the 36 sinners, their role was laid out in the excerpt we see from Dio's diary. Evil souls harbor strong power inside them. This is consistent with something he said to Jack the Ripper in part 1, which is that people who have good in their hearts can't act with their full instincts since they fear evil. Enya, who Dio would have been likely to learn much of the heaven plan from, was shown to be fascinated by Dio's unique evil, which is why she became his follower. But I guess the real question some people ask is, why 36 exactly? Well, the number 36 actually has a lot of significance. Based on some research, I was able to find that in Jewish tradition, the number 36 appears repeatedly. According to one text, the light from God on the first day of creation shone for exactly 36 hours before being replaced by the light of the sun, which absolutely feels significant with the plan being about the creation of a new universe. It is also said that in every generation there are 36 righteous people which sustain the existence of the world, so you could see how the inversion of that, which is 36 evil people, is used to undo the existence of the world. One possible significance is pointed out in the novel Over Heaven, written by Nisio Isin, which presents itself as Dio's diary. Now, I hesitate to include anything not written by Araki as outright canon, but I do think it's possible that they both came to the same conclusions here. This book says that the number 36 is related to the number 360, representing a circle, or the circuit of the universe's end looping into the creation of a new universe. The final one that stood out to me is that the number 36 can actually be found as the angle at the tip of a golden triangle, which is an isosceles triangle within the scale of the golden ratio. As an artist, Araki is known to be fascinated with the golden ratio and later integrated it heavily into the story of Steel Ball Run, so he may have intentionally chosen this number as being mathematically significant to Dio's plan. So you could see this as Dio being aware of a type of infinite energy found within life and using it to his advantage. This next one deals with the fate of Diavolo at the end of part 5, when he is placed in an infinite death loop. This is less so an Araki Forgot question and more like a general question people have, which is what happens to Diavolo after part 6's universe reset, for example, or why he can continue to die when we see his physical body continue to exist. As a result, some have said that Diavolo's infinite deaths aren't really infinite, or perhaps that he is eventually freed by something. Really, I think people are just misunderstanding the abstract nature of the ability. Gold Experience Requiem has the power to reduce things to zero. This includes nullifying and reversing the actions people do, which even includes their own death. From Diavolo's perspective, we see him continue to die in various ways over and over. Now obviously, these are some kind of illusion or dream and aren't something actually occurring. As a result, I don't think they are beholden to any kind of passage of time. When Diavolo is initially defeated, Trish wants to locate his body and ensure he's dead, but Giorno tells her that Diavolo is forever stuck, never being able to arrive at death. Some have asked what happens to Diavolo's body, but it doesn't really matter. On one hand, you could say that his body is indestructible or something since it can't die, but more so I think Diavolo is beyond the point of it even mattering if he has a body or not. Diavolo's mind and spirit are under the ability's effects, so I think it's possible that his body would simply wither away over time while his essence just continues existing in some kind of pocket reality. The other thing people bring up is the universe reset, but whether this affects Diavolo or not at all has to do with your interpretation of Made in Heaven to begin with. Pucci perfectly recreates the universe down to the smallest detail, so I don't think Diavolo's situation would change at all. All of the conditions that led to him being like this are recreated, so he would simply be back to the way he was regardless. Others argue that the final reset would have more changes, but I've argued before that the Irene universe, which mind you is separate from the Steel Ball Run continuity, would still mostly resemble the original timeline, just with a better outcome for the Part 6 main cast. However, I don't think either of these points, be it Diavolo's body disappearing or the end of the universe, play a role here at all in whether his punishment is infinite, since like I said before, the death loop takes place outside of reality and isn't subject to the passage of time. So you could think of it as Diavolo's perception of time being compressed to the moment of his death, which he will never reach. So while time continues normally for everyone else, for Diavolo it's forever stuck at 0, so for him it is infinite. Moving on to Steel Ball Run, this comment says that the race's prize money being millions of dollars makes no sense, since that wouldn't have been possible in the 1800s. However, in the manga, this is actually addressed. In the first volume, an extra page is added going over the use of numerical values. It says that since Japanese readers may not understand the use of miles and yards, they've been converted to the metric system to be more easily understood. It goes on to say that while money is shown in dollars, its value is shown using modern standards for the sake of the reader better understanding the value. This next question deals with the zombie horse, the string with healing properties gifted to Gyro by the king. Now, I've already covered this in a previous video, since some were confused why the string has this power. There I said that since we know it came from the kingdom of Naples, the string was likely blessed with the power of another saint. However, this comment asks why the string stays with Johnny and Gyro. Another commenter understandably wonders what this person means by that, and they go on to say that the string always ends up with them somehow and they don't know where it comes from. Well, as the second commenter points out for me here, the string is a physical object and can't move, and so it is simply carried around by Gyro. So I honestly have to wonder what manga this person was reading in the first place. Now we have a comment which asks why during the Boom Boom family fight, Johnny's nail-spinning ability is said to be a stand by Mountain Tim, when Johnny didn't get the arm until the Tusk arc. Well, there seems to be some confusion here. Johnny didn't get the arm during the Tusk arc. That was simply when he became aware of the arm which was already inside of him, and when he first saw the stand form of Tusk. Johnny first obtained the arm without knowing it when passing through the Devil's Palm, which occurred during the fight with the Boom Boom family, which is why that's when he got the ability to spin his nails. For another arm-related question, this person asks why Hot Pants had to leave the right arm with Lucy when she escaped, when she simply could have absorbed the arm and gotten away with it. Well, this is explained in the manga directly. Hot Pants had to liquefy herself to escape down a drain. While the ears and heart were small enough to fit, the arm was too big and had to be left behind. Now, it is true that Hot Pants has the ability to manipulate other people's flesh as well, and this is actually pointed out by her in the scene since she says that she can melt Lucy to bring her in the drain, but she would die. However, I do not think Hot Pants is able to do this with the pieces of the saint's corpse, which are heavily mummified, and so larger pieces aren't able to fit with her through small spaces, which is why she says she also couldn't bring the backbone with her. Moving on, this comment says that during the fight with Wekapipo, Johnny says that the corpse part is nearby, but asks how he could know this. After checking the JoJo wiki, they say it states that when he handed the corpse parts to one of the 11 men, a map to the next corpse part appeared, but they can't find anything in the cited chapter that shows that. Well, the citation on this paragraph points to chapter 48, when the actual event of Johnny giving away the corpse parts occurred. However, this detail of the map was actually revealed a bit later in chapter 52, where we see Wekapipo remember this event being recounted by one of the 11 men, who says that he saw the map appear showing the wolf and the location of the next corpse part. A bit later in chapter 54, Johnny also mentions having seen this and deduces this is how Wekapipo knows where to look. This next comment relates to one I featured in the last video. There, somebody pointed out that it's a contradiction that Gyro's father gave him the nickname Gyro, since he's otherwise very distant from his son. I pointed out that this is actually a misreading of the dialogue, and what Gyro actually says is that his father gave him his real name, Julius Caesar Zeppeli. In response to this, I got a comment telling me that I'm actually pronouncing the name wrong, by saying Kaiser the way that Caesar's Legion does in Fallout New Vegas, instead of saying Caesar, and that I should bother looking things up before recording. Well, unfortunately for this comment, I actually did look this up, and I'm completely right. Unlike Caesar in Part 2, whose name is written in Japanese as Shiza, clearly aligning with the modern pronunciation, Gyro's name is instead written out as Kaiser. This is actually mimicking the original Latin pronunciation of the name. In fact, I did actually make a mistake in that video, just not the one this comment thinks, since Gyro's real name is actually Iulius Caesar Zeppeli instead of Julius, which again also lines up with the original Latin. And I guess this sort of doubles as a debunking topic for Fallout New Vegas, since this person seems to be completely unaware of the significance of the pronunciation. Since of course the Caesar's Legion is based on the Roman Empire, and whether a character in the game pronounces it as Caesar or Kaiser is a subtle world-building clue as to their allegiance to the faction. This next one asks how D4C is able to transfer memories when it switches between Valentines, when we see in Part 6 that the stand and memories are two separate parts of a person. Well, beyond the fact that these are two different universes that don't necessarily follow the same rules, this isn't how Whitesnake works. The discs are not pre-existing objects within a person. Whitesnake has the ability to take specific parts of a person and remove them as discs, as we see with the discs that contain simple commands that he uses, and the ability to remove his own eyesight. And when it comes to memories, they are shown to not be a separate part of a person, since Pucci is able to remove only parts of a person's memory, which he used to remove himself from Mirashon's memories or to manipulate Foo Fighters with selective memories. This next one asks why when Valentine died, the alternate Diego didn't return to his own universe, since we know that effects of a stand reverse after the user's death. Well, I simply don't think this falls under that criteria at all. The kinds of stand abilities we see reversing after a user is defeated or knocked out are always things that I would call active stand abilities, like the zippers made by Sticky Fingers fading when Bucciarati is dying. But D4C's ability is to allow Valentine to travel between worlds. The parallel worlds already exist. D4C simply has the ability to traverse them and bring things back and forth. The ability part of D4C is the transportation itself. So I guess you could say if someone was stuck halfway in a portal, then the portal would disappear on Valentine's death. RIP to the train conductor, by the way. But for someone like Diego, this is a human being who already existed in his own universe, and was physically taken and put into the base world. He would count just as much as being part of D4C's ability as Star Platinum picking up and moving a rock would be. If Jotaro died, then we wouldn't see the rock suddenly move back on its own. That's simply not how it works. Moving on to Jojolian, this person asks why nothing happened following Josuke's escape from the hospital in the second chapter. The police who were questioning him never tried to find him again, and nothing ever came of it. However, this isn't exactly true, since following the fight with Ojiro, Josuke and Yasuho discover the body of Kira, and they actually contact the police. After this, it was said that since Josuke's identity is still unknown, he was given to Norisuke as a guardian, which is when he was officially given the name Josuke Higashikata. Next, this person asks how Johnny was able to know the location of the vault where the corpse was stored. Well, this one is easy since Part 7 shows us this. Immediately after the corpse is stolen by the alternate Diego, Steven directly tells Johnny that the president had a shelter constructed beneath the Trinity Church in Manhattan, and that the corpse was being brought there. Next, we have a question from the battle with Yotsuyu and his stand I Am a Rock. The comment says that Josuke was covered in a chemical which Yotsuyu said couldn't be removed by water, but that Araki forgot to resolve this and the chemical was never removed. This person doesn't seem to remember the scene, so let's break it down. I Am a Rock's ability is to cause one type of object nearby to become attracted to a person. The objects then continue moving towards your center of mass and pierce through your skin. So when Yotsuyu caused the bottles of pesticide to fly towards Josuke, Norisuke said that if it enters his body, he'll be poisoned. The reason Yotsuyu said it couldn't be washed off has nothing to do with the pesticide itself. It was because it was being affected by his stand ability and so would continue moving into Josuke even if it were in water. But while underwater, Josuke removed the air from Yotsuyu's lungs and killed him, which deactivated the stand ability, turning the pesticide back to normal and allowing it to be washed off. This next comment deals with one of the main focuses of Part 8, the Rokakaka fruit, and asks why the English translation changed its name from Rokakaka to Lokakaka. As the comment points out, this isn't really an Araki Forgot question, but I do think it is worth covering since a lot of fans are confused by this. When the fruit was first introduced, it wasn't written out in English, only in Japanese. Of course, in Japanese, some pronunciations are different than they are in English, and in this case you have to remember that the sounds for L and R are interchangeable. So the translator would have looked at the Japanese text and just had to guess how you would turn that word into English. A lot of the time, names in JoJo are based on English words, so we can use those context clues to determine the translation. But this is an entirely fictional name, so they kinda just had to guess. We wouldn't see the fruit's name being written out until 5 years after its first appearance, where it is shown as Lokakaka. Really, both spellings are equally valid interpretations of the text, with Lokakaka perhaps being more technically correct. The official English JoJo manga was years behind at this point, but we've actually seen the official Italian translation have to deal with this, since they also wrote it as Rokakaka. In that case, they actually edited the text that appears in the manga to match the spelling they chose. Moving on, this comment says that Johnny Joestar is never shown to have a birthmark, and yet in Part 8 and onwards, his descendants are still shown to have one. Well, I can't help but bring up here that us not seeing Johnny's birthmark in Part 7 does not in any way disqualify him from having one. If you weren't aware, Josuke's birthmark never appears in the Part 4 manga, and we can only see it in an original scene added for the anime. However, this person doesn't seem to be aware that we actually know for a fact that Johnny has the birthmark. It was mentioned in Part 8 during the Lucy Steele flashback chapters. There she is reminded of Johnny after seeing Fumi's birthmark, implying that she had seen it at some point during Part 7. Moving on, we have a couple of questions related to Part 9. If you didn't know already, Rohan has been playing a big role in the story ever since the early chapters. And with this being a separate universe, this is actually a different Rohan from the one in the main series. Some have attempted to say that this Rohan may be the one included in the newest chapters of Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan, since some elements of those, like Rohan's dog Bakin, are included in Part 9. However, when the first of the new Rohan chapters, Hot Summer Martha, was released, it was stated to take place in the original world of JoJo. This comment, on the other hand, says that perhaps the Rohan from the Louvre and Gucci stories is the Part 9 Rohan, since Rohan at the Louvre conflicts with the Part 4 Rohan's backstory. However, this just isn't the case. As we can see in Rohan at the Louvre, Josuke, Koichi, and Okuyasu are present, who do not exist in the Part 7 universe. Finally, we have one related to one of the Part 9 main cast members, Paco Laburantes. They say that Araki forgot Paco's nationality. In Chapter 24, it was stated that Paco's father came to the US from Mexico, but in Chapter 35 it was said that he immigrated from Venezuela. However, these two are not necessarily contradictory. While Paco's father may have originally been from Venezuela, immigrating from there directly to the United States is difficult. So it's far more likely that Paco's father is undocumented and would therefore have had to immigrate through the border of the US to Mexico. And that's everything I have to cover today. If you'd like to submit your own Araki Forgot topic, feel free to comment it down below. With the upcoming return of Weekly JoJo with Steel Ball Run's second and third stages in September, I feel like there's been quite a bit of renewed interest in JoJo. Part 7 is one of my favorite manga of all time, so obviously I'm excited as well. I know I've said this a lot, but I am going to be ramping up the number of videos I make in the coming months, both because of Steel Ball Run, and that I'm going to be starting to pursue YouTube as a full-time job. So I'd like to hear from you. What JoJo topics would you like to see me cover in an upcoming video? If you want to stay updated on new videos, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. You can also join the Hum and Beat Discord to be notified on new uploads and any important JoJo news. Finally, I'd appreciate if you help support the channel on Patreon or by becoming a YouTube member. Your support helps make it possible that I keep making these videos. Any patrons can also submit viewer questions. This video's question comes from Hobo Lobo. They ask, what would I think of Shizuka Joestar having the role of a protagonist in a future novel or manga? Well, I see no reason why not, since I enjoy pretty much anything JoJo. It would definitely be a challenge to make such a story though, since it would have to pretty much require creating a whole new character since we don't have much to go off with Shizuka. Although there have been some fan interpretations of that idea which might be worth checking out. If you want to submit a question, you can become a patron or member at any tier. On Patreon, you could submit it in the community chat located on the left side of the site, or through a direct message. And on YouTube, you can reply under the members only community post. I try to answer one question in each of my major videos, so feel free to ask as many as you want. Thank you for watching. This is the part of the video when I thank my $5 and up supporters. Thank you to Doorbell, Crayon, Rigo Vids, Pumpkin Doge, Sponge Cake, Cakext, Feliciano Rabaja, Christian McDonough, Pulse Dog, Rob Goliath, Gold, Red Hot Mayonnaise, Zenkai, Keenan, Saint Bobo, John Garcia, Crank and Plank, Fran Studios, Shin Megami Tensei Film Reviews, Griffiono, Fiddlehead, Justice, Joao Marchins, Danilo K, Kali, Javier's Milk, Billy the Corgi, Time Lord, Moist Daddy Tom, Daisuke, Artist 9398, Monkey 15, Conti Goat, Holy Peanut, Negef, Pluto of Pluto, and AS 2004K.